Hi, everyone. I'm Ashley Jones, and welcome to this week's Software Success. So, I'm excited to be here with you guys. You know me, this is all about our software. And this week, we are talking about piecing in the hoop one more time before we move on to another piece of software. So, tell me out there where you are watching from. I see a lot of people joining. I know it is probably beautiful summer weather where most everybody is enjoying that as much as they can. But hopefully, if you're not watching the live, that you will be watching the replay. So thanks everybody for joining. Tell me where you're watching from, and tell me if you've done piecing in the hoop. Also tell me which pieces of Dime software that you have. So I like knowing that. I can also share with you as I'm talking through these items today, things that will work in those other pieces of software. So I see, hey, Sandra from upstate New York. Tell me where upstate is. We used to live north of Syracuse in Watertown. So welcome to Software Success. So glad you guys could join me. So thanks everybody for being here. And Terry, I love her shopaholic, Terry Shopaholic. She's got there for good evening, everyone from the Netherlands. Thanks for joining. So in Wisconsin, thanks for joining, Linda. We've got Michigan in the house. Thanks for joining, Julie. Chris from Mesquite, Nevada. Thanks for joining, or Nevada. And then Michelle, I had to crack up whenever I saw that you were from Columbus, HO, but then I saw that you corrected. Thanks for joining, Michelle from Columbus, Ohio. Hi, Joan. Thank you so much for joining. I think this is going to be good. I'm going to show some fun stuff with my block piecer today. We're going to go over the topics that I had discussed, the 2 hooping blocks and then customizing. But I've got a cute little project design that you can turn into a project if you want from that will be perfect for the upcoming holiday for 4th of July. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this from cloudy Michigan. Oh, it's sunny and hot and muggy here. Melbourne, Florida. Thanks for joining, Linda. She's not too far from me. I'm down in Key Largo. And then Candace Bray, thanks for joining. Sunny and warm in Wisconsin. That sounds amazing. 80 degrees. I love that. Caroline, thanks for joining. I think Caroline, she is a good friend of Reen Wilcoxon, another good friend. So by proxy, I think that makes me friends with Caroline too. Right, Caroline? Fairbanks, Alaska. Hey, Kathy, thanks for joining. I'm sure it's beautiful up there. I bet you have some very long days up there right now. I see Topeka, Kansas. Thanks for joining, Cecilia. Wisconsin, Madison area, Arkansas, and Virginia. Thanks for joining, Dawn. You guys know her over at Creative Applique. Joanne Banco, thanks for joining, Joanne. So good to see you. She's in Northeast Ohio. So welcome, everyone. Montana. I mean, so many. Kalamazoo, Michigan. So many. Mary Ann, thanks for joining. Mary Ann's a frequent flyer, and look at her list of Dime software. I love that. So you're going to love this today, Mary Ann, and I'll talk about some things that you can do when you do have combination software from Dime, because we all know that they work together really well. And so, oh, and look at Deb's list too. I love that. I love seeing that. So, and Helen says she only has the tool shed. So Helen, it's not only, that's still a great program. You've seen already a ton of things that you can do with the tool shed, and so I think it's great that you have that one. So, and Dawn's got Pep, my quilt planner, and she's excited about my block piecer. So thanks for joining. Okay, so let's talk about piecing in the hoop. So we talked about my block piecer last time on Software Success. So that was 2 weeks ago. If you missed it, remember you can watch it, all of the replays. If you go to our YouTube channel, under the playlist, they actually are all grouped together. You can see the Software Success from the past. So 2 weeks ago, we talked about piecing in the hoop. The part 1, we talked about basics, like kind of getting started. If you haven't ever done anything with My Block Piecer, it's a great place to go to start. And now, even today, I'm going to go back over what we talked about briefly, but then I'm going to go a little bit more in depth. So, because not every block in the library can be pieced in one hooping, because sometimes our blocks, the way that they are created or the way that they form to the style of block would require more than one hooping, because we're really doing like a paper piecing kind of situation in our hoop, or foundation piecing might be a better way to describe that. And so, but we're going to talk about customizing blocks as well. And by customizing, you can actually choose to stitch only part of the block or break it down into smaller segments. So like a 4-patch, you could stitch that one in a smaller hoop if you don't have a large hoop to stitch, the complete block. So we're going to talk about all of those things today. So I've got some fun projects planned for you, and we're going to talk about those things we just said. But My Block Piecer does have the ability to create a run stitch. So all of Dime software has, different features and some commonalities amongst some of them, but My Block Piecer can only digitize a run stitch because it's only for piecing in the hoop, and that's really the only stitch we need. But there's so much that you can do with that run stitch and the built-in blocks. And look at those cute little designs that are not blocks that I used a block to create. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So, and Caroline says she's got several pieces of Dime software too. So I love seeing that. Thank you for sharing, Caroline. I appreciate that. So, and then Terry says that she's new to embroidery, just got her first machine. Oh my gosh, that is awesome, Terry. You are going to love all the things that you can do, yes, with your new toy. So we love sharing what we love. So you're going to really enjoy this. So we're talking piecing in the hoop today. So I'm going to head right over and get started, and talk about hooping or piecing in My Block Piecer. So let's start with kind of what we talked about last week, just to give anybody that missed it, a little bit of a recap. So in My Block Piecer, this is a program that is meant for piecing in the hoop. So we've got this block library. Let me go back and talk about what I clicked on. So this icon here, My Block Piecer block library, is thousands of quilt blocks that you can piece in the hoop. Now, if you come across a category that is blank, like the circle blocks, the alphabet, the curved blocks are all blanked in My Block Piecer, because this library is shared with another Dime program that will allow you to use those curved blocks or the alphabet blocks. So if you have both My Block Piecer and My Quilt Embellisher, which I noticed some of you guys did, then you can you'll see that those are populated in your library. So just so that you know why you've got empty spaces if you only have Block Piecer. But so what we're going to talk about today is some blocks need to be done in 2 hoopings, but not all of them. A lot of these blocks can be done all in 1 hooping. Like, for instance, if I choose this geese block here, and that's step number 1. Step number 2 is you want to make sure you set the size that you want it to be. In this case, it's an 8x8 block, but maybe you wanted to do a 4-patch and you wanted to make this a 12-inch finish block. So you're going to do 4 6s. So you could do a 6-inch. And then you click on this workflow icon and you click auto build, and then you sort the numbers. And then when you click preview, it builds the stitch file that your embroidery machine needs in order to stitch this block in the hoop. So that's really all that you have to do. And then you save this to your machine type and then take that file to your embroidery machine. And then you're going to stitch it based on these numbers. It actually gives you number order as long as you did the sort numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 to piece that block in the hoop. You also have the ability to use a digital cutter to cut these pieces out. So with that block selected, if you click this cutter icon, it will open up here and you can see that your pieces, I know it's hard to see on the screen, it's really light, but there is a seam allowance around each of these colored pieces here. And you can save these files. So it has it separated by color for that one block. You can also increase the repeat. So again, if you want to make 4 of those, it'll add enough pieces for 4 blocks so that you can do your 4 patch. And you can also change the seam allowance too, which I don't normally change the seam allowance unless I'm doing like a tiny block. So like this block, for instance, you can make this block really small, like a 1-inch finish. Does anybody like to do miniature piecing? That's a 1-inch finished block. If I'm going to do that, let me go back into my workflow here. You can see that with this block, you are going to have more seam than you are block. So you can see that, and it's really tiny, just a bunch of lines. So when I'm doing something like this, I would definitely change my seam allowance to something less. So maybe a 0.1 for the seam allowance, or not the spacing. Sorry, I want this, my margin here. No, it is. Maybe it is the spacing here. What am I thinking? So my offset, and then my seam allowance. Yes, I want the seam allowance. And so this wording is weird. I'm thinking it's the spacing, so I apologize for that. But you can see that it is. It did change. It has much less of a space. So the seam allowance is this spacing here in inches that you see, not the margin. The margin, I'm thinking, is going to be the spaces between the 2 blocks that we're going to talk about in a bit. And let's go back to the cutting for this. Look at those tiny little pieces. Again, if you've got the seam allowance very at 1/4 of an inch for those pieces, it's going to be more seam allowance than it is for the actual piece. So I usually, for tiny blocks, if you're doing like a micro piecing, I do like to push that down smaller, just so it's not such big pieces of fabric. So, and you would do that in both your stitch file and your cut file if you're going to cut those pieces out. But that's what your digital cutter is all about. Okay, so now that we've kind of had that refresher, let's do the custom block, or the 2 hooping block. Those are the 2 that I wanted to show you. Let's start with the 2 hooping block. So I'm going to go back to my library, and I'm going to choose this 4 triangles. Believe it or not, it does require 2 hoopings. And the reason that is, if we were to piece, let me slide this out of the way. If we were to piece this in the hoop, because piecing in the hoop is a stitch and flip method, if you were to piece this in the hoop, when we're ready to join this piece here, in order to join this last piece, you can see that we would have to do a Y seam. Well, if we have a Y seam for this piece, we can't stitch it and then flip that out. So that's why this would not be able to be done in 1 hooping, is for that reason. So you would think it would, because it's a simple block, but the nature of the block would not allow it. So let's run this through our workflow so that you can kind of see exactly what a 2 hooping block looks like, and then we can do one that's going to be a little bit more detailed to it. So remember, choose your block. That's step number 1. Step number 2, you want to set the size. So whatever it needs to be, I'm going to say a 4-inch block for this one. And then we're going to choose our workflow. And when I click the auto build and the sort numbers, and then the preview, you can see that it looks like that's all in 1 hooping, but in the middle there, where these 2 blocks are joined, they're actually not, those pieces are not overlapping. What the software is doing, it's actually creating these 2 halves in 1 hooping. And then this design, you can see, is just a straight line for this particular block. And it even gives you those numbers. So piece number 2 and piece number 1 of the previous design, you can see how those match up. It wants you to place that down, and then the next piece, or the next half, which would already be seamed together, it would run this seam, and then you've got a seamed block in the hoop. Now, you do not have to seam these together. Once you stitch 2 halves of any block, you can then cut that out of your hoop and cut it in half. And you can actually seam it with your sewing machine if you'd like, which is a lot of times what I do, because if I have to piece, 3 or 4 blocks together, like if I'm putting a 4 patch block together, I might would just do that on my sewing machine. It's really the triangles and the points that your embroidery machine is sewing for you and getting that perfect stitch out. So that is how the two blocks would work. And so let me head over here and show you in these pictures. So it would stitch this first half, and then we would piece that together. So that's number 1 and number 2. Do you see how you put right sides together? It'll do the seam, and then you flip that out. That's why we couldn't do that last piece in this block. And then it's going to stitch the other half, but it looks like they are joining, but really they're not. There's a raw edge in between these two halves that you see here. So once you take it out of the hoop and you trim the stabilizer from the outside, then you can just cut that in half along the raw edge, because 2 of those are finished already. So you cut it in half, and then you would use your sewing machine to seam that together, or you would use that second file that we just saw that was just that straight line to seam that together. So hopefully that makes sense there. So just stitch along that seam, and then you've got your block finished. And of course, if you're doing multiples of these, then you could do something like this, where you're, making your blocks to make these different larger blocks. So if you're working with a hoop that's smaller, even if it was not a 2 hooping block, this is also a way that you can fit a block into your hoop, is by breaking it into segments. So if you don't have a really large hoop, you could break it into segments to be able to stitch it kind of like we're doing here. So let me head back over here, and let's talk about another block that is 2 hoopings, but I'm going to show you a little bit more about manipulating it. So let me go to the block is called Hazy Daisy. I think it's under the diamond. And if it's not, it is here. You can search for your blocks. I don't remember if I told you this last time or not, but if you type in, so I know this block name, we found it, but it's called Hazy Daisy. So if I type in Hazy and I click the down arrow, it would jump to that. So let me do something that we're not on. So I'm going to do like Ohio Star, and then click the down arrow, and anything that has Ohio in the name, you see how it highlights it? And I can flip through any of the blocks that has that word Ohio in it. So if you're looking for blocks that have a name that you are familiar with, this is a great way to search the library to see if that block is available. And you can see we have tons of variations of blocks that have Ohio in it, and you can go back up. And then when you find the block that you want, you would then click it and say okay. So I'm going to go back to my Hazy Daisy block and add that one to the screen. So this one it needs to be done in 2 hoopings, but I also wanted to point out that you can resize a block in more than just a square manner. So we can do a rectangular block. So if I go over to my properties over here, my transform will let me set the size. Right now it's set for an 8x8. If you wanted to make this a block, maybe an 8x4, maybe you wanted to turn this into a 4-inch wide border block. So that would be a great way to do it there. And I'm going to rotate this around because my hoop is this angle. So when I had said to my workflow, I'm already in that right orientation. So now this block, let's watch what the workflow does. So I'm going to select the workflow. And now I know this cannot be done in 1 hooping because of what we just said. If I were to piece, say this half here with this number 1, I would not be able to piece these 2, because if I pieced one of them, then I'd have a Y seam to do the next one, and I can't flip that out flat. So I know that this would need to be 2 hooping. So I'm going to do my auto build, my sort numbers, and I'm going to see what the software gives. Okay, so the software says it's going to stitch these 2 pieces here in 1 hooping. And you can see here I've got design 1, 2, and 3. So that's how many different designs I've got. Design number 2 is going to take that piece from number 1, and then it's going to put this triangle with it on both of these halves. And then number 3, it's going to put those 2 halves together. Now, the software is following an algorithm that makes it figure out how to do these blocks, which is a very complicated algorithm. But us as humans, sometimes we know things that computers don't necessarily know. So for instance, this block, I'm going to actually delete half of it. This also goes to the custom blocks. You can edit the blocks. When you bring this in, you can delete parts and pieces of it if you want. And so now if I just have this portion right here, I could go to the workflow and have it build this portion, sort numbers, and preview, and it would piece this in 1 hooping. So what I could do is I could actually just save this, and I could open this file twice in the same hoop, and then I've only got the 2 hoopings, this one, and then I could either seam it together with my sewing machine, or I could get that one that seams it together. Now, I can't force that to happen, so let me undo. And what I would do is, if you want to have that second file, I would use your workflow, auto build this, sort the numbers, and preview. And I would save this file, and it's going to give you 1, 2, 3 designs, but just use this 3rd design here. And then you could, if you save this 1 design, you could then just create this half, and then you've already got the file to seam them together. That's probably the easiest way to do that. And you're just kind of, you're making the software do something that it really doesn't even know that it can do. So, and I like this better, but sometimes we are smarter than the software. It's like I said, it's running an algorithm and trying to figure this out the best way the algorithm can. But, you know, our human brain is much more complex than any computer out there, believe it or not. I know it doesn't always seem like it. So, but that's another really good 2 hooping block idea. But I love doing blocks like this that are rectangular. That'd make a beautiful border block all the way around your quilt if you need a border block to do. So I just love that. Isn't that cool? So I think that that's a really easy way to do it. So let's see if we've got any questions before we take a look at the custom block. So this is anything about the 2 hooping blocks. And Joanne Banco says, Ashley, could you show how to isolate just one piece of Dime software so that the others are not active? And so, Joanne, that's not really a feature that we share. It is just something that we really use for isolating, because for everybody out there, we want your features to all work together. And so I generally isolate, so I'm only using those features, but it's not really a feature to isolate because they all work together. And so Elizabeth Culver, thanks for joining, Elizabeth. So good to see you. She's one of my Washingtonian friends up there. She says she loves piecing in the hoop. My accuracy doing it on my own is not so good. I'm with you. I'm definitely not as much of a piecer as I am an embroiderer. So, and then Linda says that she's got Toolshed quilt planner and embellisher. That's a great combination. So all the quilting programs, every one of them work together fantastic, but the quilting ones really do work together really well. So, and another question here I see from Francis Brown says about how many of the blocks only require 1 hooping. I honestly don't know that number off the top of my head. You just need to go through and choose the block that you want. If you are interested in ones that will only do 1 hooping, in 1 hooping, then it might just require looking at. So maybe we can sort them one day. I'll maybe put in a a word. Maybe we can put a folder or something, a category in there that is just one hooping. But off the top of my head, I don't know a number, but there are hundreds I know that will hooping you can do in one hooping. So, and Phil Beck, thanks for joining. She said, could you print it out for paper piece? And you actually could, and that's actually a very good suggestion. So you certainly could print any of these artwork files, and then the lines you could use for paper piecing. So that's actually a great idea. And let's see what other questions that we might have here. Hey, thanks for joining, Reen. So glad to have you here. So, another software addict too. So, yes, absolutely. I am. I couldn't live without my software. And then Debbie Miller says, "Can you see what a quilt would look like in the software, making a sample quilt, or can you see only one block at a time?" No, you can copy and paste and see what it's going to look like as a whole. I think I actually may even have an example like that I might be able to bring up here if I try hard enough. So let's see here if I've got one that I can show you. And then if not, I'll copy and paste it, and then we can you can see what I mean. So, but yeah, quilting, you can copy and paste so that you can audition the quilt. And doesn't look like I have one on this computer, but what you could do is just copy and paste and line these up. So if I just copy and paste my block, and if you have your snap to grid on, it will actually snap right to the edge of that block, which then will allow you to build your quilt pretty quickly. So yeah, you can do that. I love doing that. I'm a visual person, so it definitely makes it easier. That actually makes a really cool kind of look there with those blocks. So I love that. So great question. Yes, you can copy and paste, and you then will get to audition that block as an entire quilt. So really good one. Okay, so if you have other questions, let me know over in the chat. I love to answer your questions. So now let's talk about a custom block. And this actually is one that I will copy and paste because it makes a really cool technique. So I have a category that I call, that's my own blocks that I play with and build from time to time. And so I want to show you how I built this one. So I'm going to go into my basic blocks, and I'm going to be using the chevron and the goose chase block. So I'm going to choose the chevron block. And for now, I'm just going to leave it the size that I have that it comes in, which is an 8-inch block. And then I'm going to go back and choose the goose chase block. So I'm going to rotate this block and move this out to the side. Oh, I need to rotate my other block as well so that this will work. So, oh, I accidentally grabbed that shape. So I'm going to undo, 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 undo. And let me just rotate everything at one time. That'll make my life easier. And then I'm going to select just these three. And remember, in any Dime software, if you hold down your control key when you're selecting, it will put a plus sign after it. And that means you can select those different pieces. So I just click, hold down control, click, click. And then I'm going to slide this one out to the edge of my block. And because I have my snap to grid on, it snaps right in place. So for these, this one here, I'm going to rotate this one, or you could mirror image it, either one. And I'm going to just slide it out of the way because I really only need half of this block. So remember, you can edit these blocks, so you do not have to use every piece of the block, and then it snaps right to the edge there. Now, if yours is not snapping, then do a right mouse click on your ruler bar here, right mouse click, and you can see I've got snap to grid, snap to guidelines, and snap to anchor points. So guidelines, snap to anchor points are if you have something selected, you can see, let me select it with my shape tool here. You can see those points there. Those are anchor points. So snap to anchor points. You also have snap to guidelines and snap to grid. So snap to grid is my grid here. You can turn your grid off and on. I usually have mine off just because it's easier to see on the screen without it. It's kind of a busy bunch of lines if I have it turned on when I'm showing how to use the software. And then the snap to guidelines. Guidelines are guides that you can click and drag down from the side of your screen or the top of the screen. And then this would allow you to adjust and align. It makes it much easier. And so the snap to guidelines, if you have these set and then you pull a design here, it'll snap right to that. So if you're trying to line something up, that's a really easy way to do it. And so again, you just click on the ruler bar, hold, and drag. And this works for every single Dime software. You can use these guidelines to help get things lined up. And as I hover over, you can see I've got that double arrow. So that means I can click it and move it. So I can line it up with the ruler bar if I want, and so that I can have a visual. And if I do a right mouse click right on top of it, I can change the color or the angle of it, or I can remove that. And if I click on the ruler bar, I can remove all guidelines or I can hide them. So that's what the guidelines are. That's what the grid is. And that's what the anchor points are that it's saying to snap through to. And those options are available in every Dime software. So no matter which one you have, those are options that you can use. So let's just do some color coding here. So now I've combined two blocks, and all I'm going to do now is change some colors. So I'm going to make this a darker blue, and then that match that blue, and I'm going to make this one match the one on the bottom. So now when I copy and paste, so I've got, whoop, you know what? I see that my block it's not all the way out to the edge. There it goes. And I could tell that. Let me do an undo and a zoom in. When I selected this entire block, so click and drag, Control A, or either over here in your settings, you can click the all items. I can see that there's a little line there. So that told me that I was still overlapping this middle block piece. So I select all three of those and I just moved it out until it snapped to the edge there. So now I know that I'm lined up with the edge. So if I select everything, that looks great. So now talking about that quilt auditioning, I'm going to copy and paste this one. You can just do your copy or paste. You can do Control C, Control V. And then I'm going to slide this up just like that. And then I'm going to rotate this around. So rotate. And look at that. You get this really cool braid effect. So if I copy and paste and move this one up, we're doing the same thing that we just said, where we're auditioning what this is going to look like as a whole. So look at, isn't that a really cool braided effect? And each one of these sections, I can piece one of these in one hooping. Now I left it the 8 inches. Let me get rid of all the extra. I left this as an 8-inch, and I do have a block that a hoop this would fit in. But if you don't, you could resize this to something smaller, or you could do it in segments if you needed to. But right now, with this entire thing selected at the very top, it tells me this is an 8 by 12-inch block, and the 8 by 12 will fit. I have a hoop that's a 9.5 by 14, even larger than that, but I know this will fit in my 9.5 by 14 hoop. So I'm going to do my workflow and auto build and sort numbers, and this will work all in one hooping. Look at that. Isn't that cool? And so now to piece this, I would just piece one of these, and then I could make however many I wanted to make a the design that we just saw on the screen here. If I do my undo, I could make as many as I wanted to make that really cool braid look. That'd be a really cool table runner, I think. So what do you guys think? Isn't that cool? I love that. So that is a way that you can create a custom block. So you can combine blocks that you see here on the screen, and depending on the block, you very well might be able to use that as a one hooping block. So let's go to, I'm going to head to, let's do the diamonds maybe. Again, the diamond and a square. And let's just take a look at some of these. So I wanted to see if there's another one we might want to edit. Let's see what else we got here. Foundation blocks, maybe 4-patch. That'd be a good one. So a lot of the 4-patch blocks are going to be ones that you would stitch in the 4 corners and put them together. But if there is ever a block that you are looking for, don't just look for the block as a whole. Look at the parts of the block, because you can make your own block by deleting or adding to these blocks that are here in this library. So for instance, let's say this block, that's actually a really cool block here, this flying windmill. But let's just say you wanted this block that you were going to put with another 4-patch block. You didn't need this entire block. You can actually delete and just work with this block here. So if I select this and do my auto build and sort numbers, and then you can see that it built that block just like that. So you can use the built-in blocks for creating by manipulating the pieces. Now you can also draw shapes as well. And if you're drawing, you might want to turn your grid on. And you do have drawing options here. You can draw your triangles, diamonds, stars, hexes, whatever it is that you want. Or you can freehand your rectangle too. You can even freehand. So you can draw by just clicking. Whoops, I had my control key down to make those curves. So you just want to click for a straight. And you can draw your block, however you want. So I've just made that square, which we could have drawn with our rectangle, but you can also make your triangles, diamonds. Your grid is really helpful in that sense. So you can draw your own block, and then once you draw this, you would use that. This is a very simple, but just to show you, you would run that through the workflow the same way you would a block, and you can see that it created the file to put those together. So you can draw your own blocks as well. So a couple of things about drawing. Having your grid on might help. Now look at my grid. It's got a lot of lines, a lot of directions. If you do a right mouse click on your ruler bar, which works in any Dime software, and choose the grid settings, look at all these options here. You can have your dash lines, solid lines, dots. You can have major and minor lines, which you can see on my screen. Some of my lines are lighter. The major lines are the dash lines that are darker. You can have, these are your snap to grid settings and stuff. You can have your size vary. I've got mine set to 1/2 inch, and then a line every 4. So that gives me a 1/4 inch, my 4 markings in my 1/2 inch. And you can change your color. You can also change the shape. I have mine set to both rectangular and diamond, but if you want it to just be the rectangle, you can too. It's a little less busy. So that's a right mouse click and your grid settings, and you can make that change to whatever you need it to be. So set up your grid however works with you. Now drawing, you have the ability to just draw with a run stitch if you want. This automatically turns it into a run stitch. So if I click, 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 and click, and I'm just going to stop there, I automatically have a run stitch. If you draw with the drawing tools, it is first an artwork. Okay. Now, so some drawing tips. If you click and then you want to make a straight line, if you hold down your shift key, it will snap so that it's straight. So, and you can see that it's only letting me, it's popping basically to the, or snapping to the 45, the 90, and so just those directions. So 0, 90, 45 kind of things. So it's keeping my line straight. If I don't hold down my control key, I could click this anywhere and not necessarily have a straight line. Now with every click, you're going to get a straight line. If you hold down your control key, it will make a curved point. Now, because we're talking about piecing, you're most often going to have straight lines, but just so you know, my block piecer does have this ability to draw that if you have, other software, it can convert to other types of stitches maybe. But if you don't hold down your control key, every time you click, you just get a straight point so that it keeps it, square or whatever shape that you're drawing there. So, and I'll turn off my grid and we can see there's the shape, and it clicked perfectly to my grid point. So it makes it nice and rectangular. Now that shape, I could not piece in the hoop, as you know, because of that extra, that Y seam that we have right there. But I just wanted to make a point about the drawing. If you need to edit your points, that's what your shape tool is for. It turns on my anchor points, and now I can move these points if I need to, if I didn't get it just right the first time. Or I could right mouse click and I could even delete the point. I can add another point. All of these work with these anchor points. This line, cusp, smooth, and symmetrical is going to change whether it is a straight point line or a curved point line, as you can see there. Okay, so those are some tips on drawing, but you can draw your own blocks. You can also import an image under File and Load Backdrop. You can actually import an image of a block that maybe you wanted to trace. So let's see here. Let's like do this one here. But if you wanted to trace this block, you could import the image. You want to make sure you define the scale from point to point here. Maybe this is a 8-inch block. And so if I do 8 and click OK, and then now I'm going to lighten up the backdrop here so that we can see it. And then I can draw right on top of that. So I could use my pen tool just like we were doing, and I could actually draw like this parallelogram just like that to trace my block. So you can create your own blocks by manipulating the blocks that are built in, or you can trace or draw your own blocks. So those are all your options for custom blocks. And then I'm going to show you something completely different than piecing in the hoop that we can do with my block piecer coming up next. Let's see if we have any questions. And so Terry says, can you import a paper piecing pattern to piece in the hoop? Yes, you could. So you would import it just like I did that block, Terry, and then you could trace it. Now, there are other programs out there that have artwork blocks like Electric Quilt. If any of you guys have Electric Quilt, we do read a WMF file that you can export from there, and it will actually import and let you convert that right to a in the hoop project. So yes, you can import images and then trace those or draw those blocks on the screen. So it's really unlimited the amount of options that you've got for blocks. And there's over, I can't remember the exact number, but there's over like 1,200 blocks built in. And I think some, that number has changed over the years, but I don't have the exact number. So you can set an outline for a certain hoop so that you can decide if you are in the right size for your project. Yes, you can turn on your hoop option. Whenever I go over there, I'll show you the hoop setting, and that works the same in all Dime software. So I'll show you that you can work within a hoop app. Yeah, absolutely. So what software can the Quilt Block program be found? So it's called My Block Piecer, and it is a standalone program. And we have that available on our site, or if you look at your local dealer that sells Dime products, they may have an even better special for you. So I always would like you to support your local dealer first and foremost. And a lot of times you'll get a better deal there, but then certainly you can get it right from our site. And I'll show you what that price is coming up. And then this question from a Reichert, I think maybe. And so how did you get the diagonal grid? That was under my grid settings, and you have the option for rectangular grid or diamond, and I had both of those turned on. So I can show you that again when I go back over there as well. Those are good questions. So love all these questions. And then Darlene says, this question might have nothing to do with this program. I'm fine with that. I'm looking for a program that can make a photo picture into a block or a quilt. A photo picture into a block or quilt. So are you saying, Darlene, maybe do a little clarification. So are you saying the picture of the block like I just imported one? Or are you saying like stitch a photograph of a person onto a block? So maybe a little bit of clarification there. We can create a block from a picture in this one, but Dime does have a program that will turn a photograph into a stitch out as well. And then Kathy Cat says, can you put in an applique design design. Yes, you certainly can. So My Block Piecer not only writes to all embroidery formats, but it does read them too. So you can import a design or open a design into the software that if you want to piece the block in the hoop and then add an applique so that it does it all in one hooping, absolutely. So I'll show you that. And so let me head back over and hopefully I can remember all those things that I will show there. And so the grid, if you do a right mouse click and go to grid settings, under the shape, I have them set to both. You can have rectangle, diamond, or both rectangle and diamond. So you can do that. So for your hoop icon is here. If you turn on that hoop icon, it gives you a list of hoops. And if you choose this filter, this actually works in every Dime software. You can see I have a check mark next to every hoop in this list, but that's because I use several different brands of machine and I'm always showing to people that have other brands of machine. So I don't have any of mine turned off, but if you only own these hoops from Brother and Baby Lock, you could uncheck all of these and only check the hoops that you've got. So then your list would only show the hoops that you own. You can actually create a new hoop size and you set the measurements for it if you don't see your hoop size in the list. But when you say okay with that hoop selected, you can see it puts the size of the hoop on your screen, so you can design within that hoop if you want. So that's a really good question there. Okay, so I'm going to do a new page here. And what was that last question? I forgot it already. The photo stitch block, you guys are going to clarify about that, in the diagonal grid and the applique design. That was the other one that I was going to show. So if we have a block, so let's just say, I'm going to go up and use a diamond block. The diamond block or the snowball block here is a really good one that I always use whenever I'm putting an applique in something. But what you want to do to merge your applique is you want to do it in the stitch file. So I'm going to go ahead and create my block from the workflow. So we've seen this process, and let me save this. I'm going to go to my desktop and I'm going to call this our snowball block. And choose the format for your machine. So I'm going to choose my Brother format here and click save. And when it saves the block, I'm going to open up that PES file. If I double click it, it'll bring it in onto the screen. You see that? And now I can merge on my embroidery design. It doesn't even have to be an applique design if you don't want it to. It could be a regular embroidery design. I'm just looking for something here that I have that might be cute. Oh, this one might be a good one. And so I can bring in this cupcake design here. And so now when I save this, I want to save it again. So file and save as, and I'm going to go back into my test block and I'm going to overwrite that PES file. And not test quilt, sorry, it was my snowball block. So I'm going to overwrite that PES file so that now my PES file has the run stitches that are going to piece it, and it's going to have the applique. So if we watch this stitch out on the screen, it's first going to piece the block and then it's going to start to stitch your applique. So yes, you can merge in design. So now in one hooping, I would have this pieced and this block, this applique stitch right on my block. So that's a really good question. Okay, so now let me show you one more thing, because we always talk about My Block Piecer piecing, but we don't always talk about the fact that you could use these blocks for other things. So I'm going to go to, let's see what I've got here, the picture blocks. I think there's a good one in here. Yes, this one. So 4th of July is coming, and you can actually turn this quilt block into run stitches and make it an applique if you want, a run stitch applique, because that's what My Block Piecer has. So I've got in my sequence view over here, if I click my sequence view at the bottom, I've got the blue for the star, the white stripes and the background of the star, and I've got the red. I'm going to turn this into a run stitch applique design, and I do not want the white. I'm going to leave that as the background stitches or whatever I'm stitching it on. And then for the star, I'm going to move that down a little bit. and I'm going to remove the center, and you'll see why in just a second. So now I've created this shape, and it is just a block, and maybe you would even want to select the red. By selecting in the sequence view, I can select red only, and I can even stretch that out a little bit further. Maybe we want to move our blue over just slightly. So I think that looks pretty cute, right? Now I'm going to select everything and turn that into a run stitch. So now I've got two different options for run stitches here. So look what we did. We just created a cute little run stitch design, but I want to go back. I'm going to do an undo, and I want to point out that I've got two different run stitches on my toolbar. This run stitch up here is only for drawing. I can draw a run stitch and it automatically converts it. This run stitch here is for converting something that's already on the screen. So if I select this, and then my run stitch convert to a run becomes available, so then I can convert that artwork into a run stitch. So I'm going to remove this one and just press delete. Okay. Now there's something else you can do with My Block Piecer. It actually has a few built-in text, 3 to be precise. Now it doesn't have many, mainly because this really is this software is meant for piecing in the hoop. So if you have My Block Piecer and no other software, I just kind of want to show you that it does have some other capabilities. So there's actually built-in text. So when I choose my text tool, this works the same way in any Dime software. And then I click on the screen, and then I can use this drop-down list, and I only have 3 options in this program. And if I hover over, it tells me what letters, what characters, what size is recommended for this font that I have selected. And then I can even increase the size here. I'm going to just let's go down to a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to use my zoom tool over here and just drag around this. You can also resize right on the screen. I'm going to go back to my text tool, and then I can resize right here as well. And it will, resize and recalculate the stitches for me. Now, this particular design here, if we watch this stitch out, look what's going to happen. I've got a run stitch design that's making my star, and then the run stitches that's making my stripes, and then my text is the last thing. If you wanted to stitch this out just as this run stitch, you certainly can. If you want this to be an applique, you guys know that by creating an applique, we just need a placement and then a tack down. And in this case, our tack down is our run stitch. So I'm going to copy and paste my entire design. And then I'm going to select the first, in my sequence view, the first set of stripes, and then I'm going to change the color. I'm going to make those orange, and the first of the star, I'm going to make that green. So that's going to tell my machine to stop, and I can put down a piece of fabric if I want. So placement stitch for my star, I can put down the fabric. Placement stitch for the stripes, I can place down the fabric, and then it's going to come back and tack that down and then do my text. Now, this all works exactly the same as any Dime software, what I'm showing you right now, except for you might have more stitch types in your other pieces. I'm going to move the star so that it stitches right after the placement stitch that we created, so that I have a placement for the star, and then it immediately does the tack down for the star after I put my fabric, and the same thing there. Isn't that cute? You can even audition fabric if you like. So if I select my star, this is my fabric auditioning option. Now we have some basic fabrics built in that I'm just going to choose from here and click OK. You can take pictures and add your own if you like. And then I'm going to choose the stars and do that same thing here and click OK. And then now you're auditioning fabric in your design. So isn't that adorable? And then one more thing I'll show you before I go, and then we can answer some other questions. So let's talk about another block that we can edit. I'm going to go to the stars, scroll down, and the very last one here. And I'm going to delete all the green. Remember, we can edit any of these blocks, delete and delete. You know what this looks like? Does anybody else think of windmills when you think 4th of July or pinwheels? Sorry, pinwheels. And this is what that reminds me of. So you could do this in a run stitch. Remember, we're going to convert to our run stitch there. Let me do an undo. Let's change our color a little bit. So I'm going to do, say, a dark red here and here. And then maybe here and here are dark blue, and then I'll do a lighter blue. I think it gives a the illusion when it's the light and the dark here. So I'm going to choose these two, and then let's give that a lighter blue. So I'm just going to choose something down at the bottom and change the color like that. And then the same thing here, we can make it, and it actually kind of looks good as that pink, that kind of pinkish color, but you certainly could change it to a different color red that's maybe not so dark if you wanted to, just like that. So isn't that cool? Now, another thing you can do, a windmill to me, or a pinwheel, is a little more rounded. Remember, we can edit these points, so I can actually click and drag to kind of round these. And this actually, what I'm showing you now, actually will work in any Dime software that has the shape tool. So any Dime software, this feature you can use if you have the shape tool. And now the block obviously is built into the program, but you certainly can create your own shapes because any Dime software has that drawing tool. And I could draw maybe the rectangle for my bottom here and put that into position. And then how cute is that, right? And I actually turned one into run stitches. And so there's mine. I put the center into. Isn't that cute? Now, this is a run stitch design that would be really cute too as an applique that you could do. And this is using a built-in block from My Block Piecer to turn that into a run stitch. So what do you guys think? Isn't that cool? So just because it says it's for piecing in the hoop does not necessarily mean that that is all you have to do, especially if you have tons of different pieces of Dime software. Let me head over here. So if you have another piece of Dime software that allows you to convert to other types of stitches, then you could convert these not just to a run stitch, you could convert this to a satin stitch. If you have one of Dime software that has a built-in option for satin stitch. So I just turned on that option. So let me select these here. And for some reason, it's not letting me click. So we'll do those and then we'll do it. So I can turn that into a satin stitch if I want. So if you have multiple pieces of Dime software, you have the ability to combine the features of all of those software. So not only can I do that as an applique or a still stitch, I could even turn that into a fill stitch. And let me put that a little bit lighter color here so you can see that it is a fill stitch. Oh, and I didn't select that correctly. So let's do that. There we go. And so now if I zoom in, you can see that that is actually stitches. So that's the beauty of having multiple pieces of Dime software. They all work together in this environment, the embroidery tool shed. So if you do have more than one piece, then it's really nice to be able to use those features together. So I can use my block library and do other things with it as well. So, okay, so let's see if we have any other questions here. And so Linda Johnston says, which Dime program does that stitching of the photo? So we have a software called Stitched Snapshot, and I'm actually going to talk about that on the next Software Success. So you'll see that coming up here soon, but it's called Stitched Snapshot. That's a really good program too. It takes a photograph and auto convert to an image. And then Linda does a digital picture. So what software does a digital picture? So the Stitch Snapshot would take a photograph and turn that into an embroidery file that is stitches. So I'm assuming that's what you mean, Linda. And then here, another question. So could you piece on batting and then quilt on the top? You absolutely could. So you could put your batting down. I would not just hoop your batting because the batting is stretchy unless you're using a particular type of batting that has stabilizer built in. I know there's some out there that's for that specific reason. But if it's just your regular batting, I would still hoop a piece of stabilizer, either your choice of a tearaway that is a tearaway wash away or a soft tearaway, or like a no-show stabilizer, and then I would put your batting on top of that. That would make sure that it's not going to stretch, while you're doing the piecing. Or you could piece on the stabilizer, and then when you're ready to do the quilting, you could put the batting on the back of the hoop and use some tape to hold that too, and then quilt through your layers. So that's another way that you can do that. That's a really good question as well. And she said I pronounced her name correctly. Yay! So could you piece on batting? Yes. And then Marianne says, could you use that flag block to make into HTV glitter? Yes, you could. And so if you've got other options in that you could turn into applique, but because My Block Piecer has a cutter, you could save those pieces right from My Block Piecer and cut them out of HTV, or you could put them in the run stitch as your applique fabric. Great question. So you can tell Marianne uses all of her pieces of Dime software. And then Linda says you referred to the Dime program that utilizes photos to digitize. That is Stitch Snapshot. And I am going to talk about that in the next Software Success, which I'll show you an image of that coming up. Is there a ruler tool? Yes, there is a ruler tool. So if we can bring my software back up, I'll show you the ruler tool quickly before we go. So over here on the left, every Dime software has this ruler tool. If you click it and you mark from point A to point B, it will measure that. So for instance, if we click at the corner of this stripe and drag to the other corner, you can see that my measurement is changing. That length is 5.37 inches. So that's the ruler tool. Click at one point and drag to the other point, and it measures that distance as you drag. You can see as I reduce the length, it's reducing that number. So yes, that's a great question. And every Dime software has the ruler tool, William. So you got it. And Caroline, too cute. So add a button to the middle of that and looks like a pinwheel. That's so true. Then I wouldn't have to do the centerpiece. So that's a great point, Caroline. So, and I've seen her stuff. She's a beautiful sewist and embroiderer. Georgette says, are there videos online to learn how to use the software? Yes. If you go to our YouTube channel, you can see all of these Software Success, and I do a different software each month. And we also have past videos from webinars in the past, and also other short videos. There are also videos built into the software for the features as well. And so if I go back over here into the software, I'll show you that quickly, and then I think we are almost done. So if you hover over any of the icons in any Dime software, you'll see a little message that says press F2 for video. If you press the F2 on your keyboard, I don't know if mine will do it, because sometimes if I'm streaming live, it doesn't want to do it. So let's see if it'll do it. If I press the F2 on my keyboard, it brings up a video in my browser of that exact icon that I just clicked on. So right there, it pulled up the slow redraw because that's what I was hovering over. And it's a short video. It doesn't have sound. It just has these call outs so you could watch it even if you are somewhere where you can't be noisy. And so you can watch those short little videos, which will help you learn. Another place over in your shopping cart to the bottom right, if you click on the dot, dot, dot next to any of these pieces of software, you don't even have to own it. If you click on it, you could say tutorial, and it'll take you to our YouTube channel. And we do have videos sorted by the different pieces of software. So these are all the ones that are relative to Perfect Embroidery Pro, because that's what I clicked on. And then don't forget, if you go to Designs in Machine Embroidery YouTube channel and click on right here, it says playlist. then you can see that we've got videos in categories. So you can see here My Lace Maker, and then Perfect Stitch Viewer, Emoji Stitches, and then these are the software success. So when you click on the full playlist, it'll show you all of the ones that are there. But don't forget, Between Friends, Eileen does every Thursday Between Friends, and she does do a short software demonstration on Between Friends as well. So if you join her every Thursday, then you'll see a short software demo. She usually does something short and then other demos and how-tos, which is fantastic. And then these are software success are longer and specific, specifically for software. So it's a longer demonstration. So those are videos that you can choose from. And of course, I think the best way to learn is just to play. If you click around in there and play, join our Facebook group. You can ask questions over there. I'm over there as well as the rest of our education team. So that's another great place to go for asking questions. So, okay. So, if you don't have My Block Piecer, then you certainly can snag it. It is over on our website, dzgns.com. That's the price. You do get a 30-minute private tutoring session and 3 PDF tutorials if you purchase that software. But I urge you to always check with your local dime dealer, because your local dime dealer has access to these and sells all of our dime software. So you certainly might be able to get a much better deal. So support your local dealer when you can, for sure. And then I will see you next Software Success. And I'm glad that we talked about this, because the photo stitching software is what I plan to talk about the next time I see you. So the first Tuesday of July happens to be the 4th of July. So I won't see you on that Tuesday. So I'll see you on July 18th. At 1 p.m. Central, and I will discuss our Stitch Snapshot software and the Stitch Snapshot Plus. So those programs are for taking a photograph and then turning it into embroidery. And so we'll go over how you do that. It is so simple and easy. You guys are going to love it. So that's July 18th, 1 p.m. Central. I hope to see you guys back here as well. And before we go, I see William has another question here. So is it a one-time fee or is it a subscription plan? William, all of our soft time is just a one-time purchase. We give you updates so you don't have to repurchase it, and it's not a subscription. It is a program that you would install on your computer, and it's not web-based or anything like that. It's an application for your computer, PC, or Mac. So great question. Now, I will tell everyone goodbye on that note, and thank you so much for being here for this Software Success, and I hope to see you again in July on the 18th at 1 p.m. Central. Thank you all for coming.